Okay, good evening, everyone that's here. Appreciate taking the time, and I know everyone's really busy, but yeah, good that you could make it today. And sorry, I've even got the wrong time on that. It's meant to be 6:30, not 7:30. I've only just done that. It's all been a bit of a rush. Okay, but thank you. So this will be the first of three series that we're going to do for this, the Julia Creek McKinley group, and including the members of the Redland Park Innovation Hub. So we've got David Hardwick again as presenter from Soil Land Food. So thanks, David. And the topic this week is soil tests, why and how to use them, and soil tests and soil types. So basically, yeah, we'll just kick off for an hour. So this soil test series of webinars are being supported by Southern Gulf and funded through the federal government's National Landcare program, and it's under two different projects that Southern Gulf is running. The Profitable Producers Creating Healthy Landscapes project, so that project enabled all those soil samples to be collected and the soil tests analysed. And then the eBeef Smart Farm project is also kind of running this event tonight, but the information is for both groups. So it's more that the eBeef Smart Farm project had identified soils as one of the topics that they wanted to do too. So we're pulling it under both projects. We'll just go on with the meeting conduct style. So I want this to be like a casual workshop style, and imagining as if we are in a room together, so you can, have a bit of a chat and, interact with David as we go, ask some questions about specific test results or whatever might be happening on screen, or about your particular test results. And so, the idea is that we do finish at 7:30 for those that, want to get on and have dinner. Have dinner and get on with their evening. And if we could just please mute yourself unless you're asking questions. And also that the webinar is being recorded and will be put up on our website for public use. So is everyone happy with that? Or just be aware that, when we're, during that discussion, that they will be, it is being recorded. Okay, thank you. Just before, while I've got the screen up, we have, I don't know if everyone's seen our e-newsletter that went out last week. We have got Daryl Hill organised for erosion control field days and property on-site recommendations. He'll be at Coveroo on the 27th of July, Sedan Dip on the 28th, and Wyangaree on the 30th of July. That's at Richmond. There will be a few property visits in between, but they're pretty full up now. But basically that's it from me. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And g'day Lockie, good to see you here. And I'll pass you over to David, and we'll hang on, David. I've just got to work out to let you share that screen. Oh, hang on, right there. I'll get there. There you are, David. You should be able to share your screen now.
Great, thanks for that. Just getting myself sorted out. G'day, everyone.
I think everyone's muted.
Yep, that's all right. That's all good. There's a couple of people that don't have the camera going, which is all good. But just so I know that you're not technically a corpse, if you can just use that little signals thing and give us the thumbs up or turn your screen on, just so I know you're there. But down the bottom of your screen, yeah, thanks, Helena. Kieran and Nigel, I don't know whether you obviously can hear us, but if you, yeah, right, I can see you, Nigel. But if you do want to keep your screen off, and because of broadband or just because you're eating or whatever it is, then hopefully you're not doing anything apart from eating. Then yeah, just just use that thumbs up little signal at the bottom. I think there's a little kind of symbols thing where you can give us the thumbs up. That's it, Kieran. Just so I know that you're still technically alive and I'm not putting you to sleep. If I'm putting you to sleep, then just get the auto thumbs up so it looks like you're awake. Okay, let's jump into it. I assume that how many people had the first session with me on soils in grazing landscapes? Can I just get a show of hands or a thumbs up? Yeah, Colin, you were in on that. And okay, so pretty much everyone. Nigel, you didn't attend that first one. No, all good. So basically, this little 3-part series that Anne's mentioned, where it's all about reading the soil test. So hopefully you got a copy of your soil test. I've got soil tests to show you. And as we go through it, I'll be drawing on them and showing you how to read them. But if you've got your soil test, it's good to have it handy. It's night time. You're probably winding down. Soil tests are about as fun as reading the parliamentary reports. But they are useful tools. So yeah, I'm just going to jump in and step by step go through it. What's else I've got to, yeah, if you've got a burning question, as Anne said, just put up your hand and that way I'll see it because I'm looking at the other screen, and just demute or turn your mic on or type it into chat. So if you've got chat, just get your chat box going. I'll keep an eye on chat as well. All right, we haven't got much time, so I better get into it. So what we're going to do is look at soil tests, why you'd use them, how to use them, and we're going to just practice the first thing that a soil test can help you with, and that's understand soil type. So hopefully you can all see the screen. This is the mob in the Northern Territory where we did a course last year, and I'd never been up there, so I was the soil expert going up to a place I'd never been. So I had to ask them what type of soils they had, and they said, Dave, we've got yellow shit, white shit, and red shit. So hopefully at the end of this webinar, you're not going to call your soil shit, but we're going to go into what soil type actually means, because it has a big influence on grazing and cropping. And so these guys have white, yellow, and red soils, but they're all kind of quite low fertility, as we'll see. Okay, so just get a quick show of hands from you, or you can punch it into chat if you can't see me, or you can't show me your hands. How confident are you in reading a soil test? Just out of 5. So if you're really confident, put 5. If you're really unconfident, just go none, just so I can get a feel for where you're at in your soils. Reading tests. Helena's shaking her head, going, nah, no idea. That's all good. Nigel's 3, so pretty confident. Righto, no worries. Lachlan, Kieran, Colin, oh, yep, there they are. Cole's at 3 and Lachlan's 1. Anne's at 2. Great, yep, all right. So we got everyone. So if you're at 3, like Kieran and Colin, then yeah, we will be going over some of the basics. So hopefully a bit of a refresher on the fundamentals isn't too boring from you. Tonight's really about starting to feel how to use a test, and then next time we get into it, or next week, we'll get into things like reading a soil for organic matter and soil health and nutrients and all that sort of thing. So why do we use a soil test? Anyone want to have a crack why we actually bother using soil tests, apart from keeping agronomists in jobs? Why else do we use a soil test? Anyone want to have a go? Why would you use one? What use are they? Decision making. Yep, that's it, Lachlan. In a nutshell, they help you make decisions. So that's pretty much sums them up. So that's my next slide. They help you make decisions. You must have been reading the slides. So that you can take action, basically. So you can take some action. And so there's 3 different types of decisions you can make with a soil test, and I've summed them up into these 3 parts. The first one is to understand the type of soil you've got, and that's what we're going to cover tonight. Use a soil test to work out the type of soil. The second one is to manage soil health, like organic matter and how well the soil's cycling its nutrients and capturing water, and we're going to go over that next week. And the third one is we can use a soil test to manage fertility. So do I have enough phosphorus or sulfur or nitrogen for my crops or my pasture, whatever it is? You can use a soil test to help you with that. Most people, when they use a soil test, they focus on the third thing, that number 3, managing soil fertility, like nutrients and fertilizers. but actually numbers 1 and 2 are probably more important initially when you're using a soil test. Okay, I'll just get that sorted out. Righto. So wherever you farm and graze, the soil is the second most important asset that you own. The most important asset is you, the people in the farm business, but the soil is there 365 days of the year. Rain, drought, rain, flood, the soil is always there, and the government hasn't yet worked out a way to tax it. So at the moment, it's something that you're in 100% control over, unless you're a cane farmer, in which case you've got regulations on it. So the key thing is that with soils, it's really easy to burn money on soils with either inputs like this Rhodes grass paddock here near Charters Towers. It's really easy to burn money on inputs and not necessarily get a result. You can put tens of thousands of bucks into fertilizer, but if it's the wrong fertilizer or something else was the issue, then you burnt that money. Or the other thing is it's really easy to lose potential income. And this is a shot out of, I think this is near Julia Creek when I was up there in 2017. So if your soil is not performing well, if it's compacted, there's no water getting into it, there's no air, the plant roots can't grow, it's too hot because there's bare ground and it's 70 degrees, all of those things mean you're not growing the grass that you potentially could, and that means you're losing potential income, basically. So soil tests are a tool to help you manage the soil asset well, and to help target your inputs and your resources, whether it be fertilizers or cattle supplements. So just before we start using a soil test, I want to just go over the golden rules when you're using them to get the best results. So whether you're here up in this northern grazing country or you're down here near my place at the moment, it's looking pretty good because we've had a reasonable autumn break. I live on the Murray River at Albury-Wodonga. So the first thing for getting the most out of them is to take your soil sample properly. So what that means, and hopefully when the samples were taken for your project that they were taken in the right way, that in this particular paddock here, for example, just get the laser pointer going, you wouldn't take soils from that mid slope up here and then mix it with the soil down the bottom here when you're sending it to the lab. So don't mix up land types, don't mix up land forms. So don't mix different soil types together. If you've got an intensively managed block where you've like a holding paddock that gets different use to the rest of the property, don't put that soil in with the soil from the nearby paddock that's not a holding paddock. So it's all about taking the sample properly, consistently for the lab. The second thing about getting the most out of a soil test is use an accredited lab. So these are the two logos that you're looking for on a soil test. And you'll see, I think I've got an example of different soils here. Here's one here. So this is one of the soils that's been sent in. I think this is Collins. Yeah, anyway, I think it's yours, Colin. And you can see here, they've got the logo down the bottom. I'll just get my little squiggly going so I can practice it. You can see here, they've got the ASPAC logo, which is a quality assurance logo, telling you that the lab is a professional lab in what they're doing. So you're not getting a test done by Dave's dodgy shipping container lab. You're getting a professional test done. Okay, so the third thing is that you choose a soil test that gives you all of the things you want to know about. So if you want to know about organic matter on your soil or pH on your soil, then make sure the lab measures that for you. We've got Bill coming in. Thanks, Bill. Welcome to the session. You're just going to have to mute yourself, Bill, when you get a chance to. So yeah, make sure that you choose a soil test that gives you everything that you need on it, pH, phosphorus, what you're looking for. Sometimes soil tests, when you do them, they don't give you all the bits of information. The more information you get, the better your management will be, decisions will be. It's like going to the doctor. If they only take your temperature and then ask to cut your kidney out, well, they haven't really done a holistic assessment. And make sure you look at a whole lot of things together, not just one number on the test. So as you practice reading soil tests, this will make sense, but there's no point just looking at one thing on the test. As in life, most things in life, it's a good thing to get a picture of the whole situation before you make a decision. Just because you get one bit of info telling you X doesn't mean it's consistent. Because I guess the golden rule is reading numbers in isolation is dangerous because everything's connected to everything else. So that's just something to be mindful of. Read things holistically, basically, like a good GP or a good mechanic. They look at all the symptoms and then they come to a conclusion. And so when using soil tests, we'll start to benchmark. So things like organic matter or organic carbon or pH or phosphorus, we'll start to benchmark in the next 2 webinars. And so don't just go on the benchmark that's on the soil test. So sometimes that benchmark is relevant, sometimes it's not. So you've got to make sure that you're evaluating your soil numbers against a relevant benchmark. And that's the tricky part of using soil tests. So we'll get to that. We'll practice that as we go through the webinars. And finally, it's really important to remember to take a holistic approach. Soil tests only tell you part of the story. You also need to assess your soil in the paddock. So this was a consult that I had to do a few years ago where there was an investor looking to buy a property in southern New South Wales, quite an expensive, large property. And they sent me the soil tests and they said, what's your opinion? Just to get a professional third opinion from their agronomist. And I said, well, there's no way I'm going to give you an opinion to spend 10 million bucks or 20 million bucks or whatever it was based on just a soil test. I need to see the paddocks. I need to go out with a spade. And it turns out that there was a lot of problems in that soil structure and a whole lot of other things that you really needed to see. So just a soil test on its own doesn't give you the full picture. So we'll get into them in a minute, but the first thing about soil tests, and those of you who've been reading them will probably have known this already, but they can look pretty confusing because they're not usually laid out in a user-friendly way. Whichever lab they're from, I've just put up the lab that you guys are using in the project, EAL, but it doesn't really matter. It can be another lab like this one here, which is a different lab on a sugarcane paddock, or it can be this lab here, or that lab there. They're all different labs, but the same problem often with soil testing is that the tests themselves look really confusing, like gobbledygook, highly technical, and they don't put them in big print and sort out the numbers in a user-friendly way. Here's another lab too. But the key thing, and this is what we're about to explore now with the soil test, is that most quality soil tests have the same key elements to them, whether it's this test or those previous ones I'm showing you. If they're a quality lab, they will have these same parts to them, and that's what we're going to have a look at now. So I'll start looking at a few tests now. So if you've got your soil test, you can grab it and have it ready to go. And I do recommend, if you have got a soil test and you're in the home office, those yellow highlighter pens, you probably, you know, the pink and yellow and green sort of highlight fluoro pens. They're really handy to have when you're reading soil tests because they help you kind of just make notes and sort of pull things apart. So let's go through them. So any soil test that's any good will have these 5 elements on them, and I'm going to go through them one by one. So they have, the first thing they have are what we call indicators. So indicators are just telling you something about their soil. If you think about a person, their height, their weight, their sex, their color of their eyes, all of that stuff are indicators telling you some aspect of a person. So let's have a look at some soil tests. So sorry, just get this out of the way. It's getting a bit messy up here. So if we just stick on this soil here, which is Bernie's. So we've got here, you can see down this side of the soil test, they've got this thing called Analytes, which is just indicator. So they tell you what the pH is, they tell you the texture, they tell you how much chloride they estimates in the soil. So these are all just aspects of the soil that this test is measuring. So in this side here, this column is where they put all the indicators or bits of information. If we get one of the EAL tests up, sorry, I'll get your tests up. And you can see here on this lab here, I'll get it, make it a bit smaller. You can see that the EAL test, they call it a different name. They call it a parameter, but it's the same thing. Down that column on your test are all the different bits of information or indicators that are helpful that you're trying to learn about your soil. And I'll just find another one to show you, if I can get that going. And you can see here this paddock here from a different lab. You can see that they put all of the indicators down this column here. So they've got the pH or calcium, all of the different indicators are in a column. And the key thing is make sure that you get on your soil test the indicators that are relevant for what you're trying to do. So any good soil test will have these indicators on them, and they have the indicators that are relevant for you in your management thinking. The second thing that a good soil test will have on it is what's called the method. So that's how they measured the aspect of your soil. Like, for example, if you're measuring the height of someone, you can measure it with a ruler, or you might want to use a laser or a more modern way of doing it. There's different ways you could measure the height of something, or how to count kangaroos in the paddock. You could just go and stand at the gate and just look over the fence, or you can get a drone, or you can fly it, or you can drive right through the paddock for 5 hours. There's different ways to count the kangaroos. So it's the same with measuring phosphorus or anything in the soil. There's different methods. So let's have a look at that. And so you can see here on this test here from Bernie, this is this is Clarafield's. You can see here, if you notice carefully, just in brackets next to that one, next to organic carbon, they've got that thing that says WB. So I'm just zooming it in a bit to make it a bit more readable. So you can see here it says WB. So that's the method that they use to measure carbon. And here I've got pH. And you can see here in brackets they've put, that's the method they use to measure it, 1 to 5 calcium chloride, or there's 1 water above it. So they're the methods that they use, the way they measured the pH. If we have a look at another couple on your soil tests, or another soil test here, sorry, get rid of that drawings, get out of that. So you can see here on this soil here, again, they put the method in brackets next to the test. So on the EAL tests, which I'll get up now, you can see that on the EAL test, they actually put the methods in a column on its own. So see how on the EAL test, which you guys have, they put the method down in its own column. So they separate it out. It just makes it easier for you to know. So you can see here that the pH or the total carbon, they use this method here to measure that carbon. So the reason it's really important is that if I say to you there's 50 kangaroos in the paddock, and the way I measured them was I just stood at the gate for 10 minutes, and this old mate goes into the paddock for 5 hours in the car and goes around and spots them in the ute. He says that there's 500 kangaroos in the paddock, and you know that his method was more accurate or different, more thorough, then you're going to go with his numbers, not my numbers. So it's important when you're getting soil tests from different labs or between years that you're following the same method for phosphorus, for example, or pH. So just be mindful that the method influences the results. Okay, so I'll come back to that. So that's the method used. Am I making sense to everyone? I know it's getting into it a bit, but just give us a double fingers if I'm making sense. Yep, thumbs up, all good, thank you. So you can see that different soil tests, they're laid out differently, but actually they have these key things. They have indicators, they have methods. The third thing that they'll have on them is a unit of measurement. So, okay, if you ask me, Dave, how far to the shops from your place, and I tell you it's 100, well, you don't know whether that's 100 meters or 100 kilometers or 100 miles or 100 centimeters. So you've got to know the unit of measurement. Is it kilos or grams? So it's the same for soils and analysing nutrients and pH and all these things. So if we get your get one of these soils up, so you can see here as I scroll down, where am I going? Oh, yep, over here. You can see here on this column on your EAL test where all the indicators are. You can see that EAL or this lab puts the units of measurement like kilograms per hectare, or we go up a little bit, get a more simple one. We've got here milligrams per kilogram, or percentage. I've got percentage there. You can see the way the unit that's been used to measure, whether it's a percentage or milligrams per kilogram or kilograms per hectare. So obviously it's important to know the unit of measurement, because if I'm talking kilos per hectare and you're talking milligrams per kilogram, we're not talking the same language. Does anyone know the equivalent unit of measurement for milligrams per kilogram? There's a more common way that it's expressed that's exactly the same. I'll give you a hint. It starts with P. Does anyone know the other unit of measurement which is exactly the same as milligrams per kilogram? If you want to have a crack, put it into chat. Parts per million. Thanks, Colin. Yes, so parts per million is exactly the same as milligrams per kilogram. They're interchangeable. So you need to be aware that different, and particularly salinity, the one that gets a bit tricky is salinity, because not so much these days, but you will get labs that do a different unit of measurement, and you've got to convert it before you can compare apples and apples, for example. Okay, so every good soil test will have the units of measurement on it. Let's grab one last one just to double check that theory. You can see here on this soil test, which is a sugarcane paddock, they've actually put the unit in its own column. So the unit of measurement is in its own column. Really easy to follow, which is good. So different labs, as you can see, lay things out in different ways. And in this lab, they put the units there, and yet they have the method over there, whereas on the EAL test, they put the method in its own column. It's all designed to confuse and confound you, so you buy more product. No, I'm just kidding, just kidding. So, but that's, I'm on YouTube, so I better not say too much. Okay, so I'll get back to the thing. So we've got indicators, method, unit of measurement, then obviously the fourth thing, which is really, really important, because you've spent the hard money, the money on getting the test, is they should give you your results. So if we look at some of your tests, the Julia Creek mob, here you can see for this one, for example, for phosphorus, they've measured phosphorus for you because we asked for phosphorus, and then they've actually given you the results. So this soil's got 15, this soil's got 2.3. Sorry, I might make this a little bit bigger, just so we can all see it. You can see here that this soil's got 15 phosphorus, this soil's got 2.3, this soil's got 9.8. So you can see different soils for that particular indicator, available phosphorus, there's different results. So any decent soil test that you've spent money on, they better give you the results, and hopefully they're accurate, because the lab is a quality controlled lab and they know what they're doing. And again, here you go. This test here, they put the results in this column that says value. So there's all our results, all our findings from the analysis. And so that's another example for you. I'll just find one last soil test to show you. We'll go back to Bernie's. So you can see here that they've put yours here. For this one, they've put the value in its own column down here. Yep. Okay, so you've got to find the results, because obviously that's what you're trying to work out, what's going on with your soil, and we'll come back to how you make meaning of those results later through the webinars. But yeah, we've got those 4 key things on a soil test. So the last thing that's on most soil tests that you get are things called benchmarks or targets. So these are kind of a guide to help you know whether your results are good or bad. So how do you know that the number 6 is good on my test unless I've got something to compare it against? So let's have a look at that. I might start with that one again from Bernie's. I'll get that one back up. So you can see how on this test here, they've not only given you the result of pH 8.7, they've also given you an optimum. See how they've given you an optimum? So they're saying here, Bernie, that your soil is outside the optimum. And then not only that, then they kind of give you a further rating over here, low, adequate or high. And I'm afraid to say, Bernie, you're inadequate, mate. You're going to have feelings of inadequacy around your pH according to the test. So that's giving you an example of how they've compared your number to a benchmark. And you can see here they've done one for aluminium percent, which is something we can look at soil health a bit. It's not that relevant for you guys in your region of Australia. It's usually more relevant in more acid type environments, but you can see how they've measured it. They've given you a result in the value column, and then they've also sort of scored it visually for you. If it's in the green, you're all good. If it's in the red, get your wallet out, basically. So if it's in the red, get your wallet out, or you're losing potential income. Either you need to fix it with an input, or you're losing potential income and you fix it with management, one or the other. So that's an example for you from that test. If we have a look over here, you can see this test here. The same thing, we've got, say, potassium, for example, and then they've given the result, and then the way they've given the benchmark is the colourful chart again. And here's an optimum range over here. They've got an optimum range over here. So you can see that lab does a similar thing. On the EAL tests, I'm just trying to get one up that has the benchmarks. Oh no, they've got to go back to yours again. On the EAL test, if you've got your EAL test, if you go right to the right-hand side, you shouldn't have one as wide as this because I've got all the results on one chart. But if you can all find and just confirm for me that you found these grey columns that say indicative guidelines. So has everyone found those indicative guidelines on the EAL test? Yep, all good. Give us the thumbs up or the two fingers, the Winston Churchill salute. Yep, good, thanks Lachlan. So you can see that on an EAL test, the benchmarks are given in a different way. They're given in these grey columns. And you'll also notice that they say indicative. So they're not giving you a black and white thing. They're saying, well, look, this is indicative. So please don't sue us. And so whereas some of these other tests, and I'm not saying this is wrong or right, but some of these other tests like, I'm just going to get this one up here, a different test again on the sugarcane. You can see they've given them an answer and then they've said, okay, here's your result. And they've given him quite a black and white, well, here's a range. So if you look on this one, it's a good example. They've given a range for phosphorus. So they've measured phosphorus and then they've said, this is your result, 21. And then they've said, you're in the red. They've said to the cane grower, you're in the red. And then they've said to the cane grower, you should be between 20 and 21. So because you're 20 and 50, sorry. So because you're 21, you're on that low end of the range. But technically, he's inside the range. Can everyone see that if they're saying the optimal is between 20 and 50, and I'm at 21, technically I'm inside the zone, the sweet spot. I might be at the lower end. So it's going to depend a bit on what my yield goals and my, what I'm trying to achieve and the soil condition and the plants I'm growing as to whether that's enough or not. So they've given him a red, but he actually might be in the green or the blue. So you can see that it's not black and white, but you can see that most soil tests these days, they will give you benchmarks, as we saw. And if I'll get that last one up just to go back over it again. We've got Bernie's here. What's this one there? Oh, yeah. So on this one, you can see here, they're giving you those charts. They've even got orange in there. So I don't know what orange means. That'll be somewhere. Orange probably saying orange alert. It's too good. I don't know. Anyway, you seem to be a bit high. So they've got a different color scheme again. Okay, so we'll come back to our basics, what we're doing here. So you can see that all soil tests have these 5 parts to them. So no matter where they come from, how many color charts are on them, once you learn to find those 5 parts on a test, you can start to be confident to read tests. So however they're presented to you, whatever colorful charts or layout, just be mindful of those 5 elements and what you're looking for. And then what we're going to do for the rest of the series is follow a bit of a logical process to reading soil tests. And so once you know how to pull a soil test apart and how to follow a logical process, those 2 things will help you build confidence and success in using them as a tool. So you can use them as a tool well for yourself successfully. And so are there any burning questions on what we've just covered? And that is sort of reading tests, the different aspects or elements on a test. Is there any burning questions anyone wants to throw at me, or I'll just keep rolling if there's not? All good? Everyone's speechless, either that or they're asleep. Okay, no worries, all good, thanks Lachlan. Righto, so let's keep going. I think we had, someone was drinking beer last time, so that's good. We're going up in the world, Anne. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's get started using a soil test. So I've given you guys the golden rules of using them, and I've pulled them apart for you into their key elements. So let's get started on using them. So what we're going to do first up is look at something called soil type. So I mentioned that the Northern Territorians told me that they have yellow shit, white shit, and red shit. They're their three main soil types. So I didn't want to accept that. I said, look, we've got to get a bit more scientific here if we want to manage these soils well. So what we're going to do is pull apart what is soil type, very briefly cover the theory with a few slides, and then we're going to use a soil test to examine it. Okay, so question quickly for you. How many soil types do you have on your place? Just give us a show of fingers or type them into chat. How many different soil types do you have on your property? Anyone want to have a guess? 3? Yep, thanks, Lachlan. Anyone else got more than 3? 1, Nigel? Yeah, pretty consistent landscape, Nigel. So you on the Mitchell Grass Downs sort of country? Anyone else got? Yep. Yeah, which is, it's quite unique in that most areas often have 5 or 6 soil types, even on quite small properties of, a couple of 100 hectares in southern Australia. But yeah, that is pretty homogenous, that sort of country. All right, I'm assuming everyone else is all good. But yeah, the key thing is that the different soil types behave differently. So that's what we're going to look at now. So just going over how soil types, why you get different soil types. Your soil's type mainly comes from the rocks from which it's formed, with a little bit of help from a few other processes. So this is a young soil. I think I showed it to you guys in the first webinar, those of you saw it. It's a very young soil, and the reason we know it's quite young is that there's still rocks in the topsoil. So the topsoil hasn't completely broken down, or the rocks in the topsoil haven't completely broken down into soil minerals yet. So this is a very young landscape near the Liverpool Range in New South Wales. So we've got rocks breaking down. So rocks break down through a process called weathering. So this is a granite soil in New South Wales. So rocks break down through this process called weathering. They break down into minerals, and it's these minerals that really define your soil type. The minerals are what really defines your soil type. So some of the things, just from a time point of view, I'll answer this without getting you guys to think it through. But there's certain aspects of your soil that comes from their minerals, that comes out of the minerals. And here the guys in one of the groups up that way a few years ago looking inside a soil pit. And the key things that your soil inherits from its minerals, so to speak, are colour, texture, mineral composition, and soil colloid. The soil's colloid. And they're the three, well, apart from colour, which is pretty self-evident, they're the 3 things that we're going to just explore for the rest of this webinar, using a soil test to work out what type of soil I'm dealing with. So here is me standing in a soil pit in sort of southwestern New South Wales. You can see here that it's got a very bright red colour soil, but you can also see white. If you look carefully, it's in the shadow. It's hard to take pictures of soil pits because there's always a shadow on one side, but you can see the white mottling through that soil. So obviously there's a certain mineralogy that's causing that colour pattern to form. So those 4 things are what I would say form your soil's type, and you can assess all of them on a soil test. You can also assess a few of them out in the paddock for yourself. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at is what's called the mineral composition, or the total fertility of your soil. So if you have your soil test, now's the time to have it handy, and we're going to go through this. So this is what we call the total fertility. So let's have a look at your soils, and if you see this soil, these are the sorry, wrong one. Got Hewendon's up. There's Julia Creek. So here we've got the soils from your project, and if you have a look down the left hand side where all the indicators are, parameters, remember that word parameters for indicator. If you have a look down, right down towards the bottom of the test, you'll see it can be on the second page depending how it's printed out. you'll see this section where it's got total calcium, total potassium, total phosphorus, total sulfur, total boron. Has everyone found that totals if you've got an EAL test? So that's a measure of the totals, the total fertility. Great, Colin. So that's an estimate of the overall fertility that has come out of your soil's minerals. And if we have a look at some of the results, let's just pick on phosphorus, which is column 72. So we've got 103 in this first soil, total phosphorus, less than 50 in this third soil here. So you can see, and then we've got 440 on this soil over here. So you can see that different soils have different overall levels of phosphorus. And I know you guys all are aware of that because there's low phosphorus and high phosphorus country across Northern Australia, particularly Queensland. And so you can see, you can measure that with a totals test. Now, a totals test is not standard on all soil tests. You have to ask for it as an extra test. If I have a look at some of the other tests, like this one here from Bernie, they haven't measured the total for you. They just haven't done it. It's not a standard test, but you can ask that lab to do it. It's the Nutrient Advantage Lab or any of the professional labs can do the totals test. You have to ask for it though, usually. And just to give you a feel for things, these are 9 soils from across Eastern Australia. And what I've done for the 9 soils is we've measured the totals. So the 9 soils include a soil near Gatton in southeast Queensland. That's a black cropping soil near Lowood and supposed to be the most fertile soil in Australia. Here's one near Stanthorpe on the granite belt in the coal country where I used to live for many years. And then I've got a North Queensland granite up near Mirrawinny Babinda under Mount Bartle Frere. And then we've got a North Queensland grazing soil near Collinsville. And you guys have your total phosphoruses. So you can see, compared to the Gatton soil, which has 1,294 parts per million total phosphorus, you can compare your soil to that level, the overall level. The granite belt on the granite soil with different minerals, you can see the total is only 89. And this number 5 is a red soil near Innisfail. So you've probably all seen those really bright, high iron red soils. We call them ferrosols, technical name, but you can see it's got oodles of phosphorus at 2,300. And if you've ever been to the lava flow country, sort of north of Charters Towers, they're going through to the back of the Atherton Tablelands, that country has 3,000 plus total phosphorus. So you can see that different, and if I go to Collinsville, on the very low phosphorus country at Collinsville, you can see the total phosphorus is quite low, 74. So you can do the same thing with calcium. You can see 5,000 versus 600 in the granite versus 85 in the tropical granite. We could do it with zinc. We could do it with any element, but it's just helping us understand the totals. And if I look at, sorry, just have to drag this down a little bit. If we look at, for example, some Northern Territory soils, this is near Katherine, and we looked at the total phosphorus near Katherine on that country. We've got 161, 78, and 50, less than 50. So that soil is very low fertility soil. It's only got 182 calcium. So compare that to your total calcium on your soil test, 182 and less than 50. And if we get your soil tests up, which I'll just grab here, you can see that your total calciums go from 3,000, 18,000, 9,000. So you can see that those soils around Katherine on very different landscapes, different minerals, more older sort of geology that's been weathered for longer, they have got very low fertility. It doesn't mean you can't make money for them. They can still be profitable, but you need to understand their limitations. You need to understand that they are low fertility soil types. It doesn't mean they can't be profitable. They can be. On the granite belt, where there's not much fertility, there's very successful broccoli and apple growers. They've just got to manage the soil type. So that's the first thing we can get from a soil test. You can get your soil overall fertility. Any questions or comments on that one? And hopefully you can see that not all soil tests do that measurement, but it's a good thing to get initially anyway, just to understand sort of what's going on, what the potential fertility. All right, good. Okay, no questions, so I'll keep going. So the second thing that I can get from my soil test is texture. So texture is the proportion of sand, silt, and clay in a soil. So obviously that Mitchell Grassdowns country it's deemed to be a moderately heavy clay, and there's not much sand around, although obviously there's the desert uplands nearby or relatively nearby, and in the country, in other grazing landscapes of northern Queensland, you get a real mixture of sand hills, sand ridges, and then heavy soils. So the soil's texture is what we say gives it its feel. So let's have a look. It's usually on almost all soils that you read. They will have measured it. So you can see here on the EAL test, the one that most of you have got as part of this project, just above the totals, here's the totals, you can see that they've given you a basic texture. They've said it's loam, which is kind of between clay and sand. So they've given you a basic texture. They haven't done a full texture test for this in this particular basic test, so it's not 100% accurate. It's just kind of rule of thumb. So it's not what you'd say 100% test. But you can see here on this test from Victoria, down in Western Victoria, you can see they've done it probably a little bit more accurately. They've done a full texture test and said that it's a clay loam. So have a look on your test, and Bernie, this test here, you can see that they've given, I think they've done the texture somewhere. Yes, so you can see here they've put the texture near the top. And you'll notice that the soil texture, they haven't scored it. They haven't said that your texture is good or bad. They've just said that's what you've got. It's like brown. They've said that the color is brown. They haven't said, gee, it should be, I want you to have a black soil, or it's nicer if you had more yellow in it. They're not scoring or evaluating that, because it's just part of soil type. You can't say it's good or bad. It's just what you have. So that's what soil type means. It's those characteristics that just what you have to deal with. You can't really change them. Not much anyway. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, and you can see that another key thing you can get on a soil test is you can find the soil's texture. The other way to measure soil texture is out in the paddock, and Anne can send you through the links, if we haven't already done so, to the Dry Tropics video series on how to assess your soil out in the paddock, and that includes a video on assessing texture. And actually the field assessment of texture, which is called a ribbon test, where you get a little ribbon of soil, is actually, once you do it properly, it's pretty easy to learn. It's a really accurate way to measure your soil's texture. And so, yeah, so you can do that. So the third thing, I'm just going to briefly introduce it to you, because we're getting close to the end, and this is quite a technical thing on your soil. But your soil has this thing in it called a colloid, and that's probably a new term for some of you guys. So a soil's colloid it's actually an electrostatic charge in your soil. So believe it or not, your soil has this electrostatic charge in it, and that charge is on the surface of your soil. Well, parts of your soil, not your whole soil. And the key parts that it's on is on your clay and what we call humus, which is the organic, long-term organic matter in your soil. So clay and humus, their technical name for them is a colloid. And what we mean by that is they actually have this charge on the surface of them. So just think of every topsoil on Earth has a level of what we call electrostatic charge on the clay and humus that it contains. So it's an electrical charge on the surface of the soil. So what's Dave talking about? Let's have a look at some of it. So let's have a look at this one first. So I'm just finding the term they use to measure it is cation exchange capacity, which I can't find on this soil test. I'm sure it's there somewhere. Where is it? No, I can't find it. That's a bit strange. Anyway, that's proved me wrong on that one. So we'll find another one. So if we go to this one here, you'll see that term cation exchange capacity, which is basically the jargon used in soils to measure the charge on them. And you can see here, this soil has a very large charge. It has a very small charge, 3.2. And if you have a look over here, everyone see on the right-hand side of this test, they've given an optimal range, and they've said anywhere from 0 to 100. Well, that makes it easy to be within the range, doesn't it? 0 to 100. So what you can see that it's hard to score it, because like texture and color, it's kind of like your soil type. It's part of your soil type. So it's not good or bad as such. It's really, do I have a large charge or a small charge? I just have to manage my soil to its charge capacity. That's the main thing. So you can make money out of a small charge soil or a big charge soil, as long as you manage them appropriately. Let's have a look at some EAL tests. So you guys have an EAL test. If you go sort of about 2/3 of the way down, if you've got a 2-page printout, but it's just here, you'll find it, and it says effective cation exchange capacity, or CEC. Everyone see that term, cation exchange capacity? That's what you're looking for. So hopefully everyone's found that on their soil. Bernie, that's unusual that it's not on there. It's probably on there. We just have to look a bit further. But you can see, does everyone see that the way it's measured is in this thing called C-moles per kilogram? Everyone see who I'm circling there, the unit of measurement? So it's actually a charge. That's actually a measurement of charge on the surface of the colloid. And then you can see here, here's the results, 2, 2.6, 1.7. You can see they have different charge sizes on the soil. I'll get you guys soils, because I think we've got some very different soils up your way. Let's get the Julia Creek soils going, and let's have a look for our charges. So we're looking for that cation exchange capacity. Here it is here. So it's on your EAL test, sort of in the middle of the test. CEC, it's measured with C-moles. C-moles is the method. And can everyone see that some of your soils, particularly that Mitchell Downs country, they have quite large charges, 54, 49, 38. You can see they're quite different soil types. So one, they often have a lot more clay, but two, the type of clay has quite a large charge in it. Now, if you're in a grazing situation, you're not going to do anything to change it, even if you wanted to, because you're not going to use inputs. But when you're cropping, it becomes relevant, because it influences how you fertilize and add things like gypsum or lime. So it is important more in cropping, but it's just important to know that your soil has this charge in it. So you don't need to know too much more than that. Suffice to say that you can't change it much. So hopefully everyone's found that charge in their soil, which is measured by something called the CEC. And last thing to just quickly show you are those 9 soils that we've been looking at across Eastern Australia. And you can see I've put the charge on them down the bottom. And you can see that Gatton soil has 45, and the tropical granite has 2.4. And that red soil, yeah, so Lachlan, it's not really good or bad. It's a bit like texture. It's just, it is what it is. So you just have to manage to its capacity, especially in cropping. That kind of makes sense. So a lot of people will say, oh, I need a big CEC, but they actually have disadvantages, especially in cropping. So it's not good or bad. They both have pros and cons, without going too far into it tonight, because it is a little bit technical, but we will come back to it as we go through the webinar series. Suffice to say, yeah, no worries. Just like texture and color, unless you're really fussy, you know, it's just what you have and you've got to deal with it. Some people like sandy soil, they prefer it. Like the guys on the granite belt growing broccoli and stuff, they actually like sandy soil with a low charge because it's easy to manage. Robert, the disadvantage in cropping is if it's out of balance, and I won't go too far on that tonight, but if the colloid is out of balance, it costs a lot more to change it, basically. It costs a lot more to change it. And also some clay types, as you'd know, get set really hard and cloddy, and that's partly the behaviour of the clay, which is related to this colloid. So there's disadvantage to it. The advantages of those soil types is they're usually more inherently fertile, and so they've kind of got pros and cons. But yeah, that's the main disadvantage in a big CEC soil. If it's out of balance, then it can be problematic getting it back into balance. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel for it. So I'll keep going because I'm mindful of time. So just to summarize soil type, it's basically the total fertility in your soil. So the total phosphorus, the total calcium, both available and unavailable. So we're going to come back to available phosphorus and sulfur and things in the third webinar. But the overall fertility is that long-term potential of a paddock or a land type. So if I know I'm on low phosphorus country, well, that's going to influence a lot of my management decisions going forward, or my expectations of that country, or even the price that I'm going to pay for it. Texture is the proportion of sand, silt and clay, and that doesn't really change unless you're a mining magnate and you can buy in truckloads of clay to fix the sand and vice versa. You're not going to change that. And soil colloids are these charges in the soil. You can have a small charge or a big charge, and they have their pros and cons. So all three of these things are kind of relatively permanent in your soil. And so you can describe your soil type, instead of using the word shit or crappy soil or that spewy country or whatever term you like to use, you can say you've got sandy, clay or loamy, large, medium or small CC, and a high, moderate or low level of overall fertility. So that just gets a little bit more specific around describing our soil type. Because often people have got, I've got brown stuff, I've got rocky stuff, whatever it is, but it's just these things influence management decisions. That's what's important to know about them. So to summarize soil type, and this is a grazier called Bob Harris in Queensland, and Bob, when we went to do the workshop on his place, he had this many soil types, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and he'd taken the time to bring them all along he'd got them all ready the day before, because he'd noticed over many years that they all respond differently to rain, to grazing, different pasture composition. So your soil types, you know, they all respond differently to management and to climate. So, and vegetation, as you're probably all well aware. So we've just tried to pull that apart a bit more. So it doesn't change much usually under management. Knowing your soil type is important because it influences every decision that you'll ever make. It influences how you graze, what type of productivity you expect, what type of pastures or legumes you might want to sow in an area, irrigation, if you're doing irrigation, how and when to irrigate. All of your management decisions get influenced by soil type. Is it worth buying that country? You know your soil types first. But once you know your soil type, you don't need to check it all the time. It's not going to change. So you don't need to check this every year. So for example, particularly that totals test, which is that extra test, once you've done it on your different soil types, you don't need to do it all the time. You already know you've got low phosphorus or high phosphorus or moderate phosphorus. So in summary, soil type's not good or bad. It is what it is. So you have to live with it. If you don't like the soil types on your place, then why did you buy it? That's all I can say. If you inherited the block, well, I'm sorry for you. And so in grazing landscapes, the type of vegetation that will grow and the grazing behavior of animals is influenced by soil type, big time. So this is the lava flow country, and you know what happens when you bring cattle here from low phosphorus areas of Queensland is where they chew bones and all those usual symptoms of low phosphorus in the landscape. As soon as you pop them on this high phosphorus lava flow country, they stop that behavior straight away. So they start to graze and behave very differently because the mineral composition of the soil changes the nutritional value of the forage, and that changes the behavior of the animals. In cropping paddocks, the soil type influences water and irrigation, tillage, how you do tillage, what machinery or tillage implements, if you do tillage, fertilizers, how much to apply. This depends a bit on CC, particularly soil amendments, and yield potential. Why am I expecting such a big yield, like it says in the fact sheet, when I'm on a very different soil type? So, you know, all of these things get influenced by actually your soil type. Okay, so I'll pull it up at that point. So are there any questions on identifying soil type, which is texture, CEC or soil's colloid size, and total fertility? Hopefully you can see that totals isn't done on all standard tests, but you can ask to get it done. And obviously we've done that as part of this project, just to help you understand your land types in a bit more depth. But if you do have any questions, feel free to punch them in now, or if something pops up after the webinar, send it through to Anne and we can deal with it next webinar. So today what we've covered is 3 things. Here's a pumpkin grower in Victoria, growing cover crops before the pumpkin crop. We've covered what and why you'd use a soil test. So it's to understand soil type, to manage soil health, and to manage soil fertility or nutrients. And those other 2 things we'll do next week. Then the key golden rules of using soil tests: use them holistically, get the sample taken properly, don't use a dodgy lab like Dave's shipping container, all of that sort of stuff to get accurate results. Don't mix up soil types in the one bag. You're just going to have a meaningless number. And then we've started to practice using a soil test. And the first thing we've used it for is just to work out how to read it so we can work out our soil type. And so it's just, you know, starting to help us make decisions so we can take the right action and not burn money unnecessarily. So reading soil tests with confidence does take time and practice. So I know some of you guys were at level 3, which is good. Obviously you've been on your soil test for a little while, but if you're still feeling a bit woozy after that session that we've just done, because it is, whatever, it's Wednesday night, and it takes practice. So don't be too upset or don't be too stressed, because we'll just keep practicing in the next 2 webinars and you'll slowly get a feel for, you know, using a soil test. I've tried to give you a bit of a process to follow today. So hopefully you've got a feel for that process of finding your indicator, finding your result, benchmarking it, checking the unit of measurement's the right one. How can someone get a soil test at Dave's shipping container? Yeah, I wouldn't go there, Lachlan. It's dodgy. So any final questions on today's topics? Feel free now. I'll open it up. Just turn your mic on and go for it. It's about an hour, so yeah, we're not too far off. The next topic is soil health, and there's a little bit to that, so we might go over by about 15 minutes. I'm just warning you for next week, because it is a bit more to that topic. But yeah, any questions or comments on reading a test or soil type, feel free to punch them in now. Otherwise, or if there's any other questions on soils, and I know there's lots around growing crops or which legumes to sow or things like that, how much organic matter should I be aiming for? We're going to cover them in the next 2 webinars in more detail. Great, thanks Lachlan for that feedback. Yeah, so I might stop sharing now, but if there is any follow-up questions, just send them through to Anne and we'll try and deal with them as we go ahead in the next couple of weeks. So I'll stop sharing and pass back to you, Anne.
Thanks very much, David. How are we going? Is everyone right? Any specific questions? I know I'm going to have some down the track with some of those ones and just the comparisons and what the difference is. Yep, but we'll leave it for now. And do we dob you in, Nigel, and say that Nigel was it had Bernie English on the. Oh,
okay. Yep. Thanks.
But yeah, Bernie did them on behalf of Nigel. Right. So yeah, and I know Nigel will be wanting to know. He was wanting to plant Lichen, so.
Yeah, just sell the farm, Nigel. That's what I'd suggest after looking at them. No, I'm just kidding you. Yeah, no, we'll get into that. We'll get into that over the next. Yeah, we'll start to dig in and have a look. I guess now you kind of know sort of what type of soil you got. Now you can sort of see, okay, what's the right enterprise to fit onto it, basically. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, no, fantastic. Thank you very much, David. So we'll come back again next week, and if everyone is prepared for another 15 minutes of that second session, then it'll go a bit longer.
A little bit more to soil health, but yeah, we'll get through it.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Good night, everyone. I appreciate you giving up your time.